It was a bright morning in the middle of the city, the kind of day where the streets hummed with life. People hurried to work with coffee in hand, taxis honked at every corner, and small shops opened their doors to the first wave of customers. The air smelled faintly of roasted beans and freshly baked bread from the cafe down the block. Amid all the noise and movement, there was one sound that stood out: soft, gentle notes of a piano floating through the air. It came from a narrow corner of the sidewalk near the park. A young woman sat behind an old upright piano, her fingers dancing across the keys with care. The piano wasn't much to look at, the paint was chipped, and a few keys stuck when pressed, but when she played, it was as if the whole street paused to listen. Her music carried emotion, the kind that made people stop mid-step and smile without realizing it. Some people dropped a few coins or bills into the small box by her feet. Others just stood quietly for a few minutes before continuing their day. For her, it wasn't about the money. It was about sharing something real in a city that often felt rushed and cold. Every morning, she pushed the piano out from a tiny rented storage space a few blocks away. It wasn't easy. The piano was heavy, its wheels squeaky and uneven. But she didn't mind. She said it was her way of exercising and staying humble. It was also her way of keeping her dream alive. Music had always been her escape. Growing up, life wasn't easy. Her family didn't have much, and she learned to play on a second-hand keyboard her neighbor was throwing away. It had missing keys and broken buttons, but that didn't stop her. She used to sit by her window, teaching herself songs by ear, copying melodies she heard on the radio. It was her secret world, one where nothing bad could reach her. When she got older, she started performing on the streets. At first, it was nerve-wracking. People would walk by without looking, some even shaking their heads as if playing on the street was a waste of time. But over time, she built a small audience, regular faces who stopped by almost every day. There was the man who sold flowers nearby, the lady who ran the cafe across the street, and the group of college students who always clapped after every song. They called her the piano girl. Every time she played, her eyes would close for a few moments and the noise of the city faded away. She didn't think about bills, rent, or worries. It was just her, the music, and the people listening. Sometimes little kids would come up and ask questions. "Did you write that song?" Or, "Can I press a key?" She always smiled and said yes. She believed that if music could touch even one person's heart, it was worth everything. But behind that smile was a quiet struggle. The money she earned barely covered her rent and food. Some days she made just enough to get by, and others she had to go to bed with a growling stomach. Still, she refused to give up. She told herself that one day, someone would notice her. Maybe someone from a music label or someone who could help her record her songs properly. And even if that never happened, she was okay with it. Because she already had what many people didn't: a purpose. On that particular morning, her fingers glided over the keys, playing a soft tune that she'd written the night before. It was a song about hope, about how even the smallest spark of kindness could light up the darkest day. The melody floated through the street like sunlight after rain. People began to gather around her as they often did. Some filmed on their phones, others clapped quietly. A young boy dropped $1 into her box, smiling up at her before running back to his mother. She smiled back and nodded, her eyes shining. For a brief moment, it felt like the world had stopped rushing. Everyone shared the same silence, the same emotion. It was beautiful. Among the small crowd was a man wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. He stood off to the side, blending in. No one noticed him at first. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with quiet confidence. People didn't realize he was famous. Someone known around the world. Someone who rarely had a moment of peace in public. But right then, he wasn't thinking about fame or cameras. He was thinking about the music. Something about the way she played struck a chord deep inside him. He had heard thousands of songs in his life, but this one felt different. It was raw, real, and full of emotion. He could see how much love and effort she put into every note. He watched as she smiled at strangers, as she nodded in rhythm, completely lost in her own world. It reminded him of what passion looked like before success, before money, just pure love for what you do. As the song came to an end, the small crowd applauded. She looked up, a little surprised at how many people had gathered. She gave a small bow and said softly, "Thank you." The man in the cap dropped a folded bill into her box and gave her a quiet nod. She smiled at him, not realizing who he was. He stood there a moment longer, then walked a few steps away. But he didn't leave. He wanted to hear another song, so she started again, this time with something more upbeat. Her fingers moved faster, her expression lighter. The music filled the air, wrapping around the city noise like a comforting blanket. Even passing cars seemed to slow down as people glanced over to see where the sound was coming from. For the next hour, everything felt peaceful. People came and went, some staying for a song, others just listening as they walked by. The piano girl kept playing, completely unaware that this day, this ordinary morning, would soon change her life forever. Because just a few blocks away, an officer on patrol was being called about a disturbance on the sidewalk. Someone had complained about a crowd blocking the path near the park. To most, it was just a few people listening to music. But to some, it was in the way. The officer didn't know what he was walking into, and the musician didn't know that trouble was on its way. The man in the cap, still standing in the shade, took a sip of his drink and looked around, enjoying the calmness of the scene. He had no idea that in just a few minutes he'd be part of something that would capture the attention of millions. The piano girl finished her song and looked up with a soft smile. "Thank you all," she said again. Her voice was gentle but confident. She wiped a bit of sweat from her forehead and adjusted her small tip box. A woman from the cafe across the street brought her a bottle of water, as she often did. The two shared a few words and laughed quietly. It was a simple, kind moment, the kind that happens between people who see each other every day and have built a small, unspoken friendship. Then the woman went back inside and the piano girl began to play again. This time it was a tune everyone recognized, a classic Mel. The day was still bright and the street was alive with noise, laughter, and the rhythm of footsteps. The piano girl kept playing, her fingers gliding gently over the keys. The music carried through the air like sunlight, drawing in anyone who passed by. For her, it was just another ordinary morning, though she didn't know it would soon become a day she'd never forget. The man in the cap still stood quietly off to the side. He didn't want attention, he just wanted to listen. There was something peaceful about the scene, a rare moment where strangers were connected by sound. Across the street, the cafe owner leaned against the doorway, watching with a smile. The little boy who always danced to her songs was twirling again. Even the man selling flowers nearby had stopped to listen. It was a moment that reminded everyone that sometimes beauty could be found in the simplest things, but not everyone saw it that way. Down the block, a police car slowed to a stop. Inside, the officer looked toward the small crowd that had gathered around the piano. He frowned slightly. From where he sat, it looked like the people were blocking the sidewalk. He didn't hear the music. He only saw the crowd. He parked the car, stepped out, and began walking toward the group. The piano girl was in the middle of a soft, emotional song when she noticed movement in the corner of her eye. She glanced up briefly but didn't stop playing. People sometimes came and went. She was used to it. The officer kept walking closer, his expression unreadable. The man in the cap noticed him too. Something about the officer's body language made him uneasy. He didn't want to assume anything, but he kept watching closely. The officer stopped near the edge of the small crowd and said in a firm voice, "Ma'am, I need you to move this piano." The music stopped. The crowd turned, startled. The piano girl looked up, confused. "Sorry?" she asked softly. "You can't block the sidewalk," the officer said. "People need to walk through here. You'll have to move it." She blinked, unsure how to respond. "I understand," she said carefully, "but I've been here for a while. I always make sure people can walk through. No one's complained before." The officer looked around, his patience already thin. "I got a call that this area was blocked. You'll have to move it now." The people in the crowd exchanged looks. The flower seller stepped forward and said, "Officer, she's been here for months. Nobody's having trouble passing by. Look, there's plenty of space." The officer glanced at him briefly but said nothing. His attention went back to the piano girl. "Rules are rules. You can't stay here." The girl swallowed hard. "I understand," she said again. "It's just that the piano is very heavy. It takes two people to move it. I can't do it alone right now. Can I please finish this song and then move it?" Her tone was calm, polite. The crowd stayed quiet, waiting. The officer crossed his arms, thinking. You have to start packing up now, he said finally. I'll wait. The girl looked down at her piano, her hands trembling slightly. Her heart sank. She had worked so hard to bring her music here. This spot had become her home, a place where people smiled because of her songs. The thought of being forced away without reason hurt deeply. She began to gather her things, her movements slow and shaky. The crowd watched silently. The little boy who had been dancing earlier tugged on his mother's sleeve, whispering, "Why is she leaving?" His mother only shook her head, her eyes sad. The man in the cap frowned. He could see that the officer wasn't being cruel, just following rules, but something about the situation didn't sit right with him. There were so many moments in life where a little kindness could make all the difference, and this was one of them. The piano girl took a deep breath. "Officer, can I please have just 10 more minutes? I promise I'll finish soon and move it. I've never caused any problems here." "People enjoy the music." The officer hesitated, his face softening just a little. But before he could answer, another voice called out from a nearby store. A man who clearly didn't appreciate the music. "Finally. I told you she's always in the way." The words hung in the air, cold and sharp. The officer turned toward the voice, then back to the girl. "You heard the complaint," he said. "You'll have to stop now." The girl's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. She didn't want to argue. She didn't want to make things worse. She reached down and closed the piano lid slowly. The soft click of the wood echoed louder than the music ever had. The man in the cap took a step forward, ready to speak, but something in him said to wait, to see what would happen first. The girl looked at the officer again. "Can I at least take my box?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "Of course." She reached down to pick it up, her hand trembling. A few coins clinked inside. It wasn't much, just enough for dinner that night. She turned to the crowd and said softly, "Thank you all for listening. I'm sorry." The people stayed silent for a moment. Then the woman from the cafe stepped forward. "You don't have to apologize, dear," she said gently. "You brought joy to all of us." A few people nodded in agreement. One by one they began to clap softly, a small gesture of support. The officer shifted uncomfortably, looking around. He didn't know what to say. The man in the cap finally stepped closer, his voice calm but steady. "Officer," he said politely, "she's not hurting anyone. There's room for everyone here. Can't you let her finish her song?" The officer turned, a little surprised. "Sir, I appreciate that, but she's blocking the walkway. I'm just doing my job." "I understand," the man said. "But sometimes doing the right thing isn't about the rule. It's about the reason behind it. Look around. No one's complaining except one person who doesn't like music. Is that really a reason to stop something that's making everyone else smile?" There was something in the man's voice, calm, grounded, and kind, that made everyone stop and listen. The officer hesitated. He could tell the man wasn't trying to challenge him. He was trying to reach him. The crowd watched in silence, waiting for what would happen next. The piano girl stood still, holding her small box, unsure whether to speak or not. She didn't even know who the man was, but there was something comforting about his tone. After a long moment, the officer sighed quietly. "All right," he said finally. 10 more minutes. Then you have to pack up." Relief washed over the girl's face. "Thank you," she whispered. She sat back down at the piano, her hands hovering over the keys. For a moment, she didn't know what to play. Then she closed her eyes and began to play the same song she had started earlier, the one about hope. The melody started soft and slow, trembling at first, then growing stronger. It wasn't just music anymore. It was emotion, gratitude, relief, and strength all mixed together. The crowd grew again, drawn in by the beauty of it. Even the officer stood still, listening. The man in the cap smiled faintly. He didn't say anything more. He didn't need to. The music was speaking for everyone. As the notes rose and fell, people recorded videos on their phones, capturing the moment. The sunlight reflected off the piano's worn wood, making it look almost gold. The next morning began like any other, but the air felt strangely different. The piano girl didn't know it yet, but her small corner of the city had already become the center of attention for thousands of people she'd never met. When she arrived at her spot, the street looked the same. The coffee stand was open, the same flower seller waved at her, and the same little boy was playing with his toy car near the bench. She smiled and waved back. trying to shake off the nervous feeling in her stomach. The day before had left her shaken. She hadn't slept much that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the officer's face, the crowd watching, the way her hands had trembled as she played that final song. But she also remembered the note, "Never stop playing. The world needs your music." That line had stayed in her mind all night. It was simple but powerful. Someone believed in her. Someone cared enough to write those words. She set up her piano carefully, checking the legs and the pedals like she always did. A few of the keys were chipped, but she didn't mind. Each mark had a story behind it. Every scratch reminded her of the journey that brought her here. As she prepared to play, she noticed a few people standing nearby with their phones out. She thought maybe they were just taking pictures of the street or recording the morning traffic. But then one woman smiled and said, "You're the girl from the video, right?" The girl blinked, confused. "Video?" she asked softly. "Yeah," the woman said, grinning. "You played that beautiful song yesterday and that man helped you. Everyone's been sharing it online. You're all over social media right now." The girl's mouth fell open slightly. "What?" Before she could say anything more, another person came up holding their phone. "Look," he said, showing her the screen. There she was, and sitting at her piano, surrounded by the crowd. The video was titled, "Street Performer Plays Through Tears After Being Told to Stop. Then This Happens." She watched herself on the small screen. The sound of her music filled the air, even through the tiny phone speaker. The caption underneath said, "This moment restored my faith in people." Her heart raced. Thousands of comments, likes, and shares scrolled across the screen. People from all over the world were saying things like, "She plays with so much heart," and "We need more kindness like this." It felt unreal. Just yesterday, she had been crying in front of strangers, wondering if she should even keep playing. And now, people she had never met were cheering for her, supporting her. She didn't know what to say. Her hands shook slightly as she set her phone on top of the piano and sat down. For a moment, she just sat there, breathing in slowly. Then she smiled. "Well," she whispered to herself, "let's make today count." The first notes she played were soft and steady. The melody carried through the street like a familiar voice. People stopped to listen again, some because they recognized her from the video, others because the music simply called to them. The little boy danced again, his shoes tapping lightly on the sidewalk. The cafe owner clapped along softly. Even the flower seller hummed to the rhythm. Within minutes, a small crowd had gathered. This time, though, the atmosphere felt different. There was an energy, like everyone knew they were witnessing something special. Across the street, a few reporters appeared, holding cameras. One of them approached carefully and asked if he could talk to her after she finished her song. She nodded politely, trying not to lose focus. As she played, the man in the cap, the one from the day before, watched from a distance again. He had seen the video that morning too. In fact, his team had shown it to him during breakfast. He hadn't expected to see himself in it, even if only briefly, standing quietly in the background, speaking just a few words. But people online had recognized him immediately. Comments flooded in, "That's him!" And he stood up for her. His name was trending, but he didn't care about that part. What mattered to him was how the story made people feel. It wasn't about fame, and it was about kindness. So he decided to go see her again. He didn't tell anyone. No cameras, no big announcement. Just him, the same cap pulled low, the same quiet smile. He arrived just as she finished another song. The crowd clapped loudly, and she smiled, bowing her head. Then she looked up, and her eyes widened slightly. There he was again, standing near the back, watching. For a moment, she didn't know what to do. Should she say something? Thank him? She wasn't even sure if he'd remember her. But before she could think too much, he stepped forward through the small crowd. People gasped quietly when they recognized him. Some took out their phones, whispering his name. He raised his hand slightly, signaling them not to make a big deal of it. Then he looked at her and smiled warmly. "You kept playing," he said gently. She nodded, smiling back. "You told me not to stop." He chuckled softly. "I'm glad you didn't." For a few seconds, the crowd just watched. A quiet, touching moment between two strangers connected by music and kindness. He looked down at the piano, running his hand along its worn edges. "This old thing's been through a lot, huh?" She laughed lightly. "Yes, it's not much, but it's all I have." He looked thoughtful for a moment, then asked, "How long have you been playing?" Since I was a kid, she said softly. My parents couldn't afford lessons, but I learned by watching videos and practicing whenever I could. This piano was given to me by a friend who didn't need it anymore. It's old, but it still plays. The man smiled, nodding slowly. It's not the piano that makes the music, it's the heart behind it. She looked at him, touched by his words. For someone so well known, he had such a gentle way of speaking, calm, sincere, and kind. The reporters started inching closer, but he waved them off politely. Let her play, he said quietly. So she did. This time she played something new, something she hadn't played before. It wasn't a song anyone knew. It came from inside her, soft, emotional, full of gratitude. Each note felt like a thank you, to him, to the crowd, to everyone who believed in her. As the song went on, the man took a step back, letting the music fill the space between them. People stopped talking. The city noise seemed to fade away. For a few minutes, the world felt peaceful. When she finished, there was a long silence. Then the crowd erupted in applause. The man smiled again, clapping softly. That, he said, was beautiful. The girl blushed, wiping a tear from her cheek. Thank you, she whispered. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small card. I have a friend who owns a studio, he said. I think you should meet him. You have something special and something real. Her eyes widened. A studio, he nodded. Don't worry, it's not about money or fame. It's just a chance to let more people hear what you have to say through your music. She hesitated for a second, then nodded slowly. Okay, she said softly. Thank you, really. He smiled and handed her the card. Keep that piano safe until then. She looked down at it, the chipped keys, the faded paint, the scratches that told her story, and smiled. I will. As he turned to leave, the crowd parted for him. People called out, thanking him, clapping, taking pictures. But he didn't stay long. He wasn't there for attention. He had seen something pure, and that was enough. The piano girl watched him go, still holding the small card in her hand. The sunlight reflected off the paper, and for a moment she couldn't stop smiling. That afternoon, more people stopped by to hear her play. Some left small notes, flowers, or coins. One man even brought her a sandwich and a bottle of water. The love she felt from strangers that day was overwhelming. As the sun began to set, she packed up her piano carefully, her mind replaying everything that had happened. She looked at the note he had given her, a simple invitation to visit a studio with a handwritten message underneath. Music connects hearts. Keep sharing yours. That night she sat by her small window, the city lights glowing outside. She opened her phone and saw that the video had now reached millions of views. People were sending messages from all around the world. Musicians, teachers, parents, kids, all saying how her story had touched them. Some offered to send donations. Others simply said, thank you for not giving up. She couldn't stop smiling. Her life hadn't changed overnight, not yet. But something inside her had shifted. She believed again. She believed in people, in kindness, and in the idea that even the smallest moment could ripple out and touch countless hearts. The city had changed in subtle ways since that morning when the piano girl's music first caught the world's attention. Every corner of her small street felt different, charged with an energy she had never noticed before. People smiled more, lingered longer, and some even stopped just to watch her play. Her mornings began earlier now, not just because she loved playing music, but because people came from across the city to hear her. She often arrived before the sun had fully risen, dragging the piano out from its storage, wiping dust off the keys and adjusting the pedals with care. The worn wood and chipped paint were familiar friends. Each scratch had a story, each dent a memory. She didn't know it yet, but her music had started to ripple far beyond her little street. The video had gone global. Millions of views, countless comments, shares, and messages. Some people wrote heartfelt letters about how her music gave them hope during difficult times. Others sent small donations or gifts wanting to encourage her. She was overwhelmed, not just by the attention, but by the love she had never expected from strangers. That morning, as she was setting up, she noticed a man approaching from a distance, tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. Her heart skipped a beat. She recognized him immediately. The man who had spoken up for her days ago, the one whose note had given her courage. He stopped a few feet away, smiling softly. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm and kind. "Good morning," she replied, blinking. She didn't know how to express her gratitude. She had wanted to thank him properly for days, but the words always seemed too small. He nodded toward the piano. "It's looking well loved." She laughed softly, a nervous, happy sound. "Yes, it's been through a lot. Just like me, I guess," he smiled. "I can see that. But you've kept it alive. That's what matters." For a few moments, they simply looked at each other, the busy street moving around them while the air seemed still. It was a quiet moment of understanding between two strangers connected by kindness and music. The man glanced at his watch and then back at her. "I wanted to tell you something," he said. "The studio owner I mentioned before, he's ready to meet you. If you're willing, they want to help you record a song, something original, something that tells your story." Her eyes widened. She had dreamed of this for years, but never imagined it would come true. "Really?" she whispered. He nodded. "Yes, you have a gift. The world needs to hear it." She swallowed hard, her fingers brushing the piano keys. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he said softly. "Just play. That's all that matters." She nodded, feeling a strange mix of nerves and excitement. This was her chance, but it also felt surreal. She had played on that street for years, pouring her heart into every song for anyone who would listen, and now the world was listening. The man smiled once more, then stepped back into the crowd, letting her have the space she needed. People whispered among themselves, pointing at him, but he ignored it. He didn't come for attention. He came to remind her of the power of believing in someone. She took a deep breath, settled her hands on the keys, and began to play. The notes flowed effortlessly, soft at first, then growing stronger, carrying emotion in every chord. It was a song of hope, of courage, of gratitude. Each note felt like a message, each melody a reminder of the journey she had traveled. People stopped to listen. Some recorded videos. Others just stood quietly, absorbing the sound. Children danced, couples held hands, and even the flower seller leaned on his stand, humming along. For a moment, the city seemed to pause. After she finished, the crowd erupted into applause. She bowed her head, smiling shyly, tears filling her eyes. For the first time, she realized how far her music could reach. She had started playing for herself, for escape, for joy, and now it was touching countless lives. Later that day, she met the studio owner. The studio was nothing like her street corner. It was bright, modern, filled with equipment she had only seen in videos. Microphones, mixing boards, soundproof rooms. It was intimidating, but she felt at home in a strange way. The studio owner greeted her warmly. "It's an honor to have you here," he said. "I watched the video. You play with so much heart. That's what matters more than anything." She smiled shyly. I just play what I feel." "That's exactly what makes you special," he said. "We don't want to change that. We want to help you share it." They spent hours talking about her music, her influences, and the songs she wanted to create. He encouraged her to write something personal, something that told her story in her own voice. At first, she felt unsure. She had never considered herself a songwriter. But as they talked, ideas began to flow. Memories of her childhood, her struggles, the street performances, the moments of doubt. All of it became material for her music. By the end of the day, she had written the first draft of a song. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. Every chord, every word carried honesty and emotion. She left the studio that evening feeling exhausted but exhilarated. Back on the street, her performances continued to attract attention. People knew her story now. They cheered, clapped, and left messages of support. Some brought flowers, some small gifts, and others just smiled. She realized how much she had underestimated the power of human kindness. Every day brought new surprises. One morning, a local musician approached her. "I saw the video," he said. "I think we could play together. Your music is incredible. Let's collaborate." She hesitated, unsure if she was ready. But then she remembered the note the man had left her. "Music connects hearts. Keep sharing yours." She realized that maybe this was what he meant, that music wasn't just for her. It was meant to reach others, so she agreed. Over the next few weeks, they played together, blending her street music with his guitar. They laughed, experimented, and created melodies that felt alive. She learned new techniques, new ways of expressing herself, and discovered that music could be even more powerful when shared. Her story spread beyond the city. Articles, social media posts, and messages from around the world poured in. People were inspired by her courage, her music, and the kindness she had received. Some wrote that they were motivated to pursue their own dreams. Others simply said, "Thank you for playing. Thank you for sharing your heart." Through it all, the man in the cap remained a quiet presence. He never demanded attention, never asked for credit. He simply continued to check in, offering encouragement when needed, and reminding her to believe in herself. One afternoon, as she was finishing a performance, she looked up and saw him standing in the crowd again. This time she walked over and handed him a small gift, a thank you card she had written. He took it, smiling warmly. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "I do," she said softly. "You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You reminded me that my music matters," he nodded. "And it does. Keep sharing it." As she watched him walk away, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. Her life had changed in ways she couldn't have imagined. From a small street corner to studios, collaborations and messages from across the world, she had come a long way. But more importantly, she realized something she had always known deep down. Music wasn't just about notes and melodies. It was about connection, hope, and the courage to keep going. Every song she played carried a piece of her story, and every person who listened became part of it. That evening, as the sun set and the city lights flickered on, she packed up her piano. The street was quieter now, but the feeling lingered. The energy of a day full of music, smiles, and small acts of kindness. She felt stronger, braver, and more inspired than ever before. She knew there would be challenges ahead. Life would never be completely easy. But she also knew that she wasn't alone. There were people who believed in her, who wanted to see her succeed, and who would continue to support her journey. Her music had started on a small street corner, for a small audience. But now it had reached far beyond her imagination, and she was ready for whatever came next, because she had learned the most important lesson of all. When you follow your heart, share your gift, and believe in yourself, the world listens, and sometimes, just sometimes, the world surprises you with kindness that changes everything. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Maybe more challenges, maybe new opportunities. But for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. She placed her hands on the piano and whispered, "Thank you," as if speaking to it, to the man, to everyone who had been part of this unexpected journey. Then she closed her eyes and played one more song, soft and full of peace, the kind of song that makes you feel like everything will be okay. And somewhere, across the city, the man who had spoken up for her heard the music in his mind again. He smiled quietly, knowing that sometimes one small act of kindness could change a life, and maybe even the world. And when the last note faded, there was silence, the kind that fills you up before applause breaks out. The crowd clapped louder than before. Some cheered. The girl smiled through her tears, bowing her head. The officer looked down for a second, embarrassed but also moved. He gave a small nod. "All right," he said quietly. "That was beautiful. You can finish packing now." The girl nodded. "Thank you for letting me play," she said softly. He gave a short wave and turned to leave. As he walked away, the man in the cap stepped forward and quietly dropped something into her box. She didn't notice what it was until later. The crowd began to disperse, people heading back to their busy lives. The flower seller waved to her. The cafe owner blew her a kiss from across the street. And the man in the cap, still unnoticed for who he truly was, smiled once more before walking away into the crowd. The piano girl sat there for a long time, her hand resting gently on the keys. She felt tired, but her heart was full. She looked down at the box and saw what he had left in a folded note. She opened it slowly. Inside was a few bills and a short message written in neat handwriting. "Never stop playing. The world needs your music." She smiled, tears filling her eyes again. She didn't know who the man was, but his words felt like a gift, a reminder that kindness still existed. The sun was setting now, the sky painted in shades of gold and pink. She packed up her things slowly, whispering to herself, "Tomorrow, I'll play again." And she did. But she didn't know that the video someone had recorded that afternoon, of her playing after being told to stop, was already spreading online. People were sharing it everywhere, talking about the girl who played her piano with heart, the crowd who stood by her, and the kind stranger who spoke up. By the next morning, everything was about to change. Odi that brought a bit of nostalgia to the crowd. Some people hummed along. A man in a suit stopped, checked his watch, then decided to stay for another minute just to listen. The man in the cap smiled to himself. He thought about how rare it was to see something so pure in such a busy world. Someone creating beauty not for fame or money, but simply because it made people feel something. He thought about his own life, how the spotlight could sometimes make people forget simple joys. For a moment, he wasn't a celebrity. He was just another person, standing on a city street reminded of what really mattered. The song faded into silence again, and the street filled with applause. The piano girl looked shyly around, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. She didn't crave attention. She only wanted to share her heart through music. And she did. If anyone had told her that this ordinary day would soon become one of the biggest moments of her life, she probably would have laughed. For her, it was just another day with her. The days that followed were a blur of excitement and change for the piano girl. What started as an ordinary, quiet life as a street performer had turned into something much bigger. People from all over the world had seen the video. They had shared her story, and somehow everything felt different. She had been thrust into the spotlight, but at the same time it didn't feel like the spotlight. It felt more like the universe had just given her a big hug. She had played the piano on the street for years, day after day, facing the same small struggles. Sometimes it was cold and sometimes it was difficult to make ends meet. But music was her escape. It was her love, and it was her way of connecting with the world. Even on the rough days, she knew it was where she belonged. But this new chapter? It was something else entirely. She had never expected fame, and now that it was starting to come her way, she didn't know how to feel about it. The videos had gone viral, the comments were endless, and the offers began pouring in. People reached out from all walks of life, from professional musicians to people offering her studio space, to random strangers who just wanted to express their admiration. Some were kind, some were curious, and some were just interested in the story. The media started reaching out too. They wanted to interview her, film her playing, and take pictures. The calls were overwhelming at first, but she tried to handle them with grace. There were moments when she was grateful for the attention. After all, her dream had always been to reach more people with her music. But then there were moments when it all felt too much. One afternoon, as she sat at her piano in her usual spot, a reporter approached her again. He was friendly but direct, camera in hand. He had seen the viral video of her performance from days ago and wanted to ask her about what happened with the officer. She looked up at him, unsure of what to say. The officer had come to represent more than just a figure of authority. He had become a symbol in her mind, someone who had stood in her way, but also someone who had ultimately given her a chance. He had let her play when no one else would. The reporter smiled as he set up his camera. "How does it feel to have your video go viral?" he asked, his voice excited. "How does it feel to be this much of an inspiration?" The piano girl hesitated for a moment. She wasn't sure what to say. She wasn't sure how to express how all of this had changed her life. "It's overwhelming," she said softly. "I never expected any of this. I just wanted to play my music. I didn't want to cause a scene. But now it feels like everyone is watching me." "Do you think the officer who told you to stop playing made a mistake?" The reporter pressed, adjusting his camera. She paused. This was the part she had been struggling with. She had spent so much time thinking about the officer's actions, trying to understand his perspective. He was just doing his job, right? But at the same time, she couldn't shake the feeling that he could have handled things differently. "I don't know," she said quietly. "I think he was just following orders. Maybe he didn't understand how important the music was to me, but I don't want to hold any grudges. He gave me a chance to keep playing, and that's what matters." The reporter smiled at her response. "You've shown a lot of grace," he said. "That's something a lot of people admire. What's next for you?" She looked down at the piano, the keys glistening in the sunlight. "I'm just going to keep playing," she said, her voice steady. "I've got a lot of people supporting me now. I don't know where this will take me, but I'm going to keep following the music." The interview ended soon after, and the reporter packed up his equipment. He thanked her for her time and left, but not before telling her he would be following her story closely. As the day wore on, the crowd around her continued to grow. People came by just to say hello, to shake her hand, or to ask if they could take pictures with her. The piano girl was starting to get used to the attention but she still wasn't completely comfortable with it. Music had always been a private thing for her, a way to express herself without speaking. Now it felt like everything she did was under a magnifying glass. In the coming days, she found herself thinking more about the note the man in tea